Call the meeting to order. I'm glad it got awfully quiet when I came here this morning. I thought it was I don't know what it was. But anyway, I apologize for being late. I was standing outside the door talking, which I do too much of. Anyway, if the secretary would call the roll.
Senator Carpenter, Senator Cattleman, Senator Givens, Senator Howe, Senator Parrott, Senator Thayer, Senator Webb, Senator West, Senator Westerfield, Senator Wise, Representative Callaway, Representative Dixon, Representative Dossett, Representative Pfister,
Here.
Representative Flood, Representative Graham,
Here.
Representative Hart,
Here.
Representative Herron,
Here.
Representative Imes,
Here.
Representative Kim King,
Present.
Representative Cook, Representative Kilcarney,
Present.
Representative McPherson,
Here.
Representative Pollock,
Here.
Representative Pratt,
Here.
Representative Rayburn, Representative Raymond,
Here.
Representative Reed,
Here.
Representative Stevenson,
Here.
Representative Tate, Representative Thomas,
Present.
Representative Tipton, Co-Chairman Representative Heath,
Here.
and Chairman Senator Hornback.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum today. If everybody would join me in standing up, and we're going to do the pledge, then afterwards, Chairman Heath is going to do a prayer for us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's have a moment of prayer. Father, we're thankful to you for this time we can gather together with these ag leaders and business leaders from across the state. Guide our footsteps and our paths as we move forward, and forgive us of our sins and where we fail you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody being here today. Like we got a good crowd today, and we got a good many things to go over. Do I have a motion on the minutes? Got a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign, motion carries. Do any of our members have any guests that they'd like to introduce before we go forward? Well, okay.
Thank you,
Senator.
Chairman. I have Mr. Caleb Ragland's in the audience with us. Caleb needs no introduction, but Caleb's a good old LaRue County board, and glad to see him up here this morning. Please make him feel welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Quarles, looks like you're first on the agenda today. I'd like to invite you up and your guests that you have with you, and if you all could introduce yourself for the record. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, and good morning.
Make sure your mic's on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, folks, we need some rain in Kentucky. Most of the state's still in a moderate or abnormally dry state right now, so please keep our farmers in your prayers. County fairs are up and rolling, and thank you for a productive legislative session on agriculture as well. And we're still taking volunteers for the Kentucky State Fair. So if you all want to come work with us, especially in the show rink, just let us know. We won't charge you at all, but we could use some extra pair of hands at the State Fair next month. Before we get started here, I just have a couple introductions, if you don't mind. We do have a group of our Kentucky Department of Agriculture interns. If you'd like to please stand and be welcomed. Thank you so much. We have several 4-H and FFA state officers with us this summer. We also, in addition to Dr. Katie Flynn, our state veterinarian, we also have a new addition to our Office of Veterinary Services, and that is our Deputy State Veterinarian, Dr. Cary Barling. Thank you for joining the team. We have a lot of subjects to cover this morning, so I'll be brief. Today, we'd like to focus on an issue that's been lingering not just in Kentucky but nationwide, and that is a shortage of large animal veterinarians across Kentucky. Some areas are worse than others, but Just remember that Kentucky is a livestock state. Actually, a majority of our cash receipts come from livestock. And so if we have inadequate access to veterinarian services, it becomes a problem real big. This has been an issue that's been lingering for at least a decade or so. And we do have a lot of programs in place that are helping this, but we think that we can do a little bit better. And that's why we're meeting with you all today. Our existing programs happen to be USDA loan repayment programs for those veterinarians serving in underserved or non-served areas. We also have a loan program through the Kentucky Office of Ag Policy where perhaps a young veterinarian has the ability to access low-interest loans to buy out an existing retiring veterinarian as well, and that is working across Kentucky. And of course, there's our reciprocity agreement that you all generously fund each year. 38 slots with Auburn Veterinarian School, 3 slots with Tuskegee. That reciprocity agreement's been in effect since Harry Truman was president of the United States. I've had the opportunity to go down there twice to attend the graduation ceremonies and attend a tour of their facilities. It really is second to none. Yet, despite all these programs, we still seem to suffer, particularly in the more rural areas, access to large animal veterinarians. And so we decided to press the reset button and start a dialogue with many of the folks that are in the audience here today about what we can do. And last month, Kentucky State University hosted us at their research farm, along with our office, the Office of State Veterinarian, the Kentucky Board of Veterinary Examiners, the Kentucky Veterinary Medical Association, Kentucky Office of Ag Policy, as well as representatives of Auburn University College of Veterinary Medicine, as well as many in the crowd. I think Chairman Heath was there as well. And so we just want to see what we can do. What can we do? We challenge the group to be bold. We want to not leave any option off the table. We have to consider loan repayment programs like what we're seeing in a lot of the medical services right now, or perhaps creative programs where a veterinarian, if we give them an incentive that they'll practice at least a couple days a week in these underserved areas. And so this was a first meeting of what we envision to be many. Farm Bureau was there as well, the cattlemans, our pork producers, our friends of the poultry industry, et cetera, et cetera. But we basically have a year and a half left until I leave office. And so we want to make sure that we address this problem efficiently, but also if we have to approach the General Assembly next session for some sort of help or relief or program, that we have it well organized and studied before we bring it before you. And at this time, I'd like to stop, introduce our Chief of Staff, Keith Rogers, to go through some slides.
Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to present this. When Chairman Heath and our Senator Hornback asked us to present this morning, what we're going to do here in the next few minutes is go through what we did on June 15th, what the agenda you have in front of you, the stakeholders dialogue. We had roughly 70 individuals there that day, leaders from ag, leaders from the vet sector industry. And you'll see on the agenda on your screen, and as I go through the packet that you have in front of you, I'm going to go through this very quickly because there's a lot of information. We had more than 2 hours of presentation and discussion, and for us to combine that down to 15 or 20 minutes for you, I'm going to move it very quickly. But this packet, I thought, is the key slides from each of the presentations. And it would be a service, a reference for you all as we go forward in this discussion and any potential legislation or any activity, budget activity that you all may have going forward. So, but what we did on June 15th was something that's not been done in at least my involvement in agriculture for several decades. And that is we brought the vet industry together along with the agriculture leadership together for a conversation or a dialogue about these issues. And there's 2 key points that I want you to know about before we start through these slides this morning. Number one, we have a shortage of veterinarians in all sectors. It's just not food animals. It's small animals. It's regulatory. It's USDA food safety vets. We have a shortage in all of those sectors as far as vets go. And there's not going to be one silver bullet to resolve this issue, and it's not going to be done very fast. It's going to take several different efforts, both short-term and long-term, to address this issue that we have in front of us that we need to do. This morning, we're going to start out first with Dr. Katie Flynn, our state veterinarian. She's going to go through the presentation briefly that she made that morning, and then I'm going to walk you through the rest of the presentations very quickly, only hitting the highlights on some of these slides that you'll have before you. So, Dr. Flynn.
Good morning, and thank you very much. So I'm going to go through a few of the slides that we went through during this meeting to highlight the importance of veterinarians to a regulatory perspective, or if you look at it from the food supply. So we have our veterinarians, our private practitioners in the field. They're at the markets, they're looking at animals, they're writing health certificates to make sure animals are healthy to move across state, or they're doing tuberculosis testing to make sure that there is no TB in our cattle that are going into our food supply, whether it's meat or milk. We also have the veterinarians out there that are doing Coggins testing or equine infectious anemia testing, where there is an increase in that disease. And we also have veterinarians that are out there doing surveillance for chronic wasting disease. And that's the picture you see with the histological slides for chronic wasting disease. But more importantly, there are eyes and ears out in the field. Go ahead, Keith. Because they're there to look for foot and mouth disease and African swine fever, as we're concerned that that is going to hit our food supply very severely if it does hit this country. So there are eyes and ears out there, and it's critical that we have veterinarians that are out there watching for these diseases and contacting us so that we can take regulatory action as quickly as possible so that we can eradicate and control these diseases that would decimate our industries. So from a state animal health perspective, we look at it from a preparedness and response situation. And that's really what we're here for at the Office of State Veterinarian. We're the epidemiologists. We have the veterinary expertise to do those risk assessments, to do the modeling, to do the planning, to get some grant money in so that we can get the supplies or equipment that we need if we were to have a foreign animal disease or a natural disaster. So what we need to control those diseases or to end suffering of animals. We're also there to provide that outreach and education so that practitioners as well as the industry is up to speed and are aware of what the disease risks are, such as African swine fever, which is not far from our mainlands here now in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So that's what we're there for. And we're also there for doing our emergency preparedness and response, whether that's writing our foreign animal disease response plan so that we're ready when something comes and hits us, or if foot and mouth disease hits us, we're ready with a vaccination plan so that we can resume our business continuity and allow for movement of animals. Unfortunately, in these situations, we also have to think ahead as far as depopulation and disposal and having some plans taking into consideration that the health and welfare of the animal as well as the public if it is a zoonotic condition. And as far as moving it ahead and advancing, we want to be prepared through secure food supply planning to have our producers prepared in case they need to activate in a case of an outbreak situation, and always training and exercising our staff. Now, these are our objectives. However, we've had a little work to do over the last few months, and I'll just go back to starting with Kentucky State Fair. The Office of State Veterinarian has 37 employees on the books, and at that point in time, we have a state fair where we check in every animal. So our staff is very limited to be able to do that. And so that's one thing that hits us. But at the same time, unfortunately, in September, right after State Fair, we had the detection on September 8th of chronic wasting disease at our border, 8 miles from our border, which has significant impact on our farm cervid industry as well as our wildlife population. So we had to activate our response plan in a 5-county area in coordination with the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources so that we could activate and make sure that if it is there, that we're detecting it. Unfortunately, those surveillance efforts had to end quickly because of the tornado, which we'll get to in a moment. So we'll just go from August State Fair to September, October, chronic wasting disease. And then at North American, again, it's another event at the Expo Center, and we check in every animal that's coming in for that North American International Livestock Expo. We check the animal's health. At the same time, the last 3 days of that North American, we had a foreign animal disease, Southern Agricultural Functional Exercise, FAD Safe Exercise, that was committed to 2 years prior, but because of COVID, it had to be put off. And this was 12 states activating their foot and mouth disease response plan or stop movement plan. So we activated our emergency response plans and for a 3-day exercise. Unfortunately, the second day I got the notification that we had a COVID exposure, so I only had 6 people that could come back out of 30 the next day to do the exercise. So that's real life, but that's all what we're dealing with and trying to get our plans in place and responses. So that's November. Then that brings us to our breathing time, hopefully. Unfortunately, it wasn't a breathing time. And we had our tornado that hit us, and we responded with addressing the mortality issues and animal issues, animal welfare issues, and the storm disaster response. As we were cleaning up from that, we thought we were going to get a little bit of a break, and unfortunately, high-path avian influenza hit us in February in the same area as the tornado, which again is a supply issue and a response issue when you're trying to respond to a disease and you have no hotels because there's none in the area. You have limited resources. So again, this is our shortage of personnel and situations that we were placed in. So thankfully, to the efforts of the commissioner and Keith, the chief of staff, we've reevaluated what's available to us, and they were able to find us available funding in their current budget for a 4th veterinarian to assist us from that field perspective, and more importantly, from our perspective, to help with some of that emergency response. So we're going to get an emergency response coordinator. So I thank them for giving us those 2 positions right now, and we're working forward to fulfill those. We're looking at working for contract work to get us some of these plans activated and implemented and increase our collaboration. So the other component that I wanted to say from the perspective of addressing the shortage situation, we have been working, as you can see, since 2018 with the USDA National Institute for Food and Agriculture, and they have their veterinary medicine loan repayment program. We at the department and the Office of State Veterinarian actually put the nominated areas forward, and the way we look at that is we look at the current veterinary demographics, and we look at the NASS data for livestock in those areas to determine where those shortage areas are. We have a total of 5 shortage areas that are allotted to the state of Kentucky. Each year we give one of those shortage areas to the laboratory because they're having each of the laboratories. 1 year will go to Breathitt and 1 year will go to University of Kentucky, and because they're also suffering some of those same shortages. So we have put 5 awards forward, 4 of them in private practice, 1 in public practice. And as you can see there, we've put 20 nominations forward, 5 each year, and we've only had 9 that have been awarded. That's a national level of awarding. We have no input into those awards. It's done all through USDA and their selection process. And so they're matching the people to the positions that we have described. And this is a 3-year commitment for those individuals, and they get $25,000 a year for that 3-year commitment and to support their loan debt. So again, this is in certain areas, and they have to document their service through this loan program. So I believe that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flynn. The next set of slides that I'm going to run through come from the Kentucky Board of Veterinary Examiners, which is the licensing board in Kentucky. And with us this morning is Michelle Shane, who's the executive director of that board. In 2018, that board moved over to the Department of Agriculture for administrative purposes. It's attached to us as a separate board, but attached to us for that administrative support. It's been a tremendous move working with the Office of State Vet and working with this board. I think you've seen in these slides, and you will learn that they have really increased their role working with the industry and providing some leadership there. A couple of the things that I want to point out from their presentation is they also presented that day on what they have a modernization for the Medical Practice Act. I'm not going to get into that because of the time constraints this morning, but they will be presenting to the L&O committee on July the 21st, that legislation that they hope to bring forward in the 2023 session. But for this program this morning is a couple of the highlights that I want to make sure that you have this morning. If I can get the pointer to kind of circle. This is one of the numbers that I want you to remember. The KBVE issues approximately 270 new license each year, and that's an average of 2019 and 2020, to give you some incident of how many vets we're bringing into Kentucky under the licensing program. Down here underneath that, you see the new graduate licensing program, and you can see this is a new program that they've created to help address the vet shortage issue. And you can see there over the last 3 years, Auburn 22, 24, and 23 new license, and LMU 13 from that. This slide also I want to show here is to point out here is the 44 total 2020 graduates that are licensed in Kentucky. This 44 is from all vet schools in the U.S. Then for the 21 number, the 54 is all total vet schools. So you can see there that we had the number of graduating students that do license in Kentucky, and then you can also see to the right there how many of those with a Kentucky mailing address. And so, of course, that'll be something that you'll see in several of these slides, the difference between the total license numbers and the total that actually have Kentucky address. Let me back up real quickly on one thing right there. This last question down here, how many report being food animal vets? One out of that 44 and 54. Each year at the conclusion of their licensing process, they also have about 258 licenses that expire that do not get renewed. Now these are on a 2-year cycle. The number you just saw was for 1 year. These are on a 2-year cycle. So you can see that we're in ballpark, we lose roughly half of our veterinarians. The next 6 pages I'm going to hit very quickly in the interest of time, but there's a couple things on each page that I do want to point out. These are the statistics that before the last couple months we've really never had. And this is work, again, that the Board of Veterinary Examiners has done with their database and collecting information, and was part of the catalyst for us deciding to hold the dialogue meeting on June 15th to share this information, because as the old saying goes, you got to know what the problem is and you got to understand the facts of the problem before you can address the problem. And that's what the dialogue was all about, was putting these types of information in front of the ag community and the vet community. But here you can see you've got 1,695 licensed veterinarians with Kentucky residents, 26 altogether. If you look down here in the left on the red side, you see also that 39% of those practitioners are age 55 or older, assuming within 10 years of retirement. And you can see the actual numbers there within those decades. The next the next slide that I want to point to breaks down food animal, equine, and small animal, and then other. And it goes to the amount of time that each area the veterinarian focuses on. And I'll take this food animal first. If you see here, and what we're considering is any veterinarian that spends 70% of their time or more, we're considering them full-time food animal veterinarians. Look at the number beside it, 54. In the entire state of Kentucky, we have 54 veterinarians who consider themselves full-time food animal veterinarians. And then you can see the percentage increases as you go down to the 1 to 15% would be what we consider a true mixed animal type clinic. Now, take a look at the equine number. The equine number is much larger because, of course, many of us know the equine sector in Kentucky with the thoroughbred industry, et cetera, has a lot of dedicated equine veterinarians. So you have 338 veterinarians that consider themselves full-time practicing in the equine. Then dropping down to the small animal sector, you can see over 1,000 consider themselves full-time to practicing in the small animal arena. One of the trends that I'll point out here that we've learned through this meeting and other conversations is that with these full-time vets at the top, the full animal vets up here at the top, we're starting to see trends where the farmer is now bringing the animals to the vet. The Ag Development Board in the last 6 months has helped assist funding for 2 facilities at clinics where the animals can be brought to and worked because it is so inefficient from the vet standpoint to travel, to take that time, and to recover the cost of that travel and that time to go out to make that farm visit. So where the treatment or whatever's being done can be done, they're bringing it to it. The next slide that I want to touch on basically breaks down in slide 3A, breaks down where the vets actually work. And you can see in this first line, the private practice, you have 1,379. Now, this is all vets, 1,379. And then down to where you see the corporate practice, those two lines, the 1,379 and the 81, are really the vets that work or see animals. I'll put it that way. Your academia, your regulatory, your military practice, the nonprofit are different from that standpoint. I'm going to skip Table B in the interest of time. That deals directly with the lab technicians. Again, on this next slide in 4A, it goes back and helps you understand a little bit more about the age of the food animal veterinarian, and the percentage of time that they are working on animals and what their age is. Again, the 54. If you look, of course, similar to the equine at the bottom of this slide in B4, and then in C4C, excuse me, you see the small animal vet. You can see the age of the small animal vet there. Again, 1,076 versus 54 vets working and considered full-time in the vet world. This next slide here will give you the percentage as it breaks down for equine. Again, 331 in the private practice arena, 8 in the corporate that are actually seeing animals, and the rest of those in that. What we did ask each of our presenters on June 15th to do is kind of give their opinions and some of the causes of the shortage and some of the solutions. And so on each of these, I'll give those slides from each of these organizations, and keep in mind that these are from their opinion in their presentations. The Board of Veterinary Examiners summary basically was there's not enough vet schools, not enough seats, even with new schools being built in Arkansas, New Jersey, and Utah. The selection process, and you may hear a little bit about this in every one of these presentations, is that the selection process being used by the Veterinary Medical College Application Service, which is what most of our universities use, favor a higher GPA, which tends to go to small animals. Stop and think about it. You got young farmers. What drives a young person to go back to the farm to production agriculture? What drives a young person to enter the field of veterinary medical medicine to literally go back to the farm? Oftentimes that person may not have the GPA, maybe the good old boy down the road, but he's got the sense and the brains to go to vet school and to succeed. That system today basically doesn't help bring that person in. Auburn basically is looking at ways to figure out how you can bring that student in, or find a way of criteria and a structure of evaluating the potential of that person, and looking at moving away from the higher GPA process that's in. Of course, we've all heard the large student loan debt is an issue, and we'll get into those numbers in just a minute. The veterinarian business model is different, and it's changed drastically in Kentucky. The demanding work hours and the eroding relationship with producers and licensed vet. I'll expand on that just a second. Our producers are better producers today. They're more educated. They can do more themselves than they could 10 or 20 years ago on these animals. They don't call the veterinarian as often and as much as they need. And for that reason, that relationship is eroded. We have one practicing veterinarian on the 15th basically say to the audience, he's talking about, what the farmer can still use me for. And he said, and his example was preg check, cattle. He said, just stop and think about it. If I identify one open cow, I've paid for that visit. If I identify 2 open cows, I've made that farmer money. These are the kinds of messages that I think we can utilize to get that relationship built. I share this slide with you just so that you can see some of the things that the KVE is working on. I'm not going to touch on this one. And then, of course, their solution slide. Again, you'll have this to take with you. And I do want to point out the second bullet there, that the continued partnerships and discussion, that's what June 15th and this dialogue was all about. Next presentation was the Vet Medical Association. Of course, as many of you know, that's the trade organization for the vets. Deborah Hammelbach is out of town, so not here today, their executive director. But I do want to say thank you especially to them for providing lunch and helping us organize this event. Their mission, as you can see here, is to really advocate for the industry. Their efforts basically have been from everything from the contract spaces that you all fund every year to working with industry sectors, legislation, as I mentioned, the Practice Act modernization a little while ago. They also have several programs, leadership programs, similar to what we see in many of our agricultural organizations, Farm Bureau, Cattleman, et cetera, Ag Leadership Program, to help vets mature and grow into the industry and also into rural Kentucky and our large animal. They have a vet mentoring program, but one of the most important, most exciting things, I guess you could say, that we have actually planned and moving forward with is student chapters at Auburn. On October the 4th this year, the KVMA and the Board of Veterinary Examiners, along with the Office of State Vet, KDA, and KOAP, will be going to Auburn on October the 4th to help establish the first Kentucky student chapter at a vet school. And this is going to be a mechanism by where we, as the state of Kentucky, those organizations can start to work with, identify, cultivate, and get to know the potential students that we can bring back to Kentucky to work in these areas. Real quickly, just hit on the foundation mission statement. They do have a foundation that helps them fund many of these items and the foundation goals. Lincoln Memorial University. Many of you may have not heard of Lincoln Memorial. It's at Hargate, Tennessee, right next to the Cumberland Gap National Park. And this school its veterinarian school was accredited in January of 2019. And as you can see on the map, it's been very successful in bringing many of its students back into Kentucky, especially in southeast Kentucky, as you can see in the color-coded map there. One of the successes that LMU has had is in Kentucky residents is 67% are from rural backgrounds. And basically what we're seeing is a larger percentage at the bottom there, the 20 results and the 21 results. You can see there that 38.9% versus the national rate of 20 return and are planned to return and work in rural communities in Kentucky. This information was brought to us again by the KVMA and basically is very interested in making a difference in what we're working on here. Before I jump to the Auburn comments, I do want to mention that we had Dr. Deborah Shoulders from Bowling Green, who is a practicing veterinarian, also speak to the group that day about the challenges that she has faced as a practicing veterinarian with farmers, and then also Brian Lacefield with KOAP, who talked about the loan program that was recently modified in May to allow for the debt the student debt that a student has to be able to use that as match in the loan program the commissioner mentioned earlier. That loan program is open to all vet students, just not Auburn, just not Tuskegee. It's open to all vet students, and basically it gives an opportunity for a student to buy into a practice or to start their own new practice if they so choose. To date, we've had 14 of those loans made, and it's making a difference in our students. Moving on to Auburn's presentation very quickly. Of course, as the Commissioner mentioned, we had Dean Johnson, Associate Dean Melinda Camus, and Mr. Sellers, who runs their practicing management program at Auburn, attend. Out of this slide, the one thing I want to point to is over here on the right side under the class of the 22. Of course, this is the 22 class here that just graduated. You can see the Kentucky numbers at 38, the Alabama numbers and the large at 36. But 92% of the Kentucky students desired to come back to Kentucky and to practice or to return home, in essence. One of the other trends that this slide really shows is this trend up down here of female and male. This was raised several times during the discussion that we're seeing basically this industry become female. In fact, Dr. Shoulders in her presentation I mentioned a second ago basically said we need more men in this industry. But as you can see there of that class, total class, 92 females, 27 males. So that is something that we're seeing a trend across the U.S. in all vet schools that we need to find. And it goes back to that criteria of selection that we need to look at. The next slide, you can't talk about student shortage of vets without talking about the debt. This slide right here, as you see over here on this far right side, The Kentucky students graduating in the class of 2020 basically had on this, and this is the federal loan program. They may have additional loans outside, but this is the federal loan program. 140,000. The Alabama students had 147,000, and the at-large students at Auburn had 231. That shows you real quickly the benefits of the program, the slots that you all fund each year. But drop to the bottom of the page. The American Vet Medical Association basically is predicting that the average student debt at graduation nationwide is $218,000. So it gives you a very quick snapshot of where these funds are. This page will give you some quick salary information on what students are seeing in the way of contract offers, et cetera. You can see at the bottom there, the AVMA salary estimator for mixed animal in Kentucky starts an average salary of $81,773 with that range that you see there. And of course, this is, when you get into what we look at state veterinarian and deputy state veterinarian and what we're trying to do, that's what we're competing against. And as Dr. Flynn said a while ago, in filling some of our positions, particularly in the vet area, that's the challenges that we're up against. The Auburn has identified the challenges, and we've all seen these, and I won't take time to go through each of these, but basically rural practices are different. They're different than small animals. There's a different way of operation, and so they have identified these issues here. The next three slides that I'm going to hit basically go to a program that Auburn has been operating since 2017, 2018 with a USDA grant, and Kentucky has benefited greatly from this. Basically, this grant ends August the 31st, and so basically this is something that we want to find a way to continue to bring. In fact, actually, on Tuesday of this week, Dr. Flynn and I had a meeting with Dean Johnson and his folks at Auburn again about the potential structure of this program, what the budget would look like, what we would need to do to keep this program going in Kentucky. Auburn has applied for the grant again. They have received the grant, but they're going to focus this grant on Alabama, where they focused this grant on Kentucky for the last 4 to 5 years. And so we're going to be looking for a way to keep this program going. But in this program, you have 20 externships that are a 2-week experience for students to go out and learn in the practice. As you have 20 preceptorships, which are 8-week experiences, and 95% of those students in that 5-year period that went through this program accepted jobs in rural practice. The program works. This is what we need to be focused on in identifying those that are willing, have the passion and the interest to come back and do food animal vets. 15 of those accepted jobs in Kentucky. The others were in the states you see there. 2 of those are now owners in those practices. The other part of this program is they take 6 students, Mr. Sellers, and 6 students travel to clinics to do basically what we'll do an evaluation of that clinic. I've done 47 in that period of time, 21, 14 in different counties in rural Kentucky as designated in short areas. Basically, this information comes back, and this is what they've learned. They've learned basically that these practices, where the deficiencies are, where the profitability is, where changes can be made. For example, a small percentage of their inventory or their billing system or the way they have their fee structure done can often make 2, 3, 10% difference in their bottom line. And in many of these practices, that can be $50,000 to $100,000 enough to bring on an associate or to pay the difference in that salary starting salary that they may be able to offer versus what they can to really get the type. One of the big challenges that this program has found is owner exit strategies. Most of our clinic owners don't have an exit strategy for when they retire or when they want to step down. This creates an opportunity for that young student to come back to rural areas and do food animal practice if we can put the incentives there and put the assistance in place to help them do that. This is my last slide. These are the potential solutions that the Auburn University brought forward that day. The second bullet there, for determining the predictors for rural practice entry, goes back to what I mentioned about changing the GPA usage of selection and moving more in a way of finding students of passion and interest who want to come back and do this, and finding a way to get them into vet school when their grades or their GPA may not be as well. This third bullet I'll share with you, and this is the one that the General Assembly and you as the Interim Ag Committee may want to start to think about and consider. Conditional points to those contract seats. What we've learned is that in some cases, optometry, whatever it may be, there are conditions on those seats. In other words, you have to come back and do something, practice a year, practice in rural Kentucky, something like that. This idea has been kicked around in several conversations I think that some of us have been involved in over the last many years, but we've never gone that road. But this is the one area that the General Assembly may want to take up and take a seriously look at if we want to do this. I mentioned a while ago, why does a young person choose to go into production agriculture? What we need to identify is why would a young person want to go into veterinary medicine and food animal. And I think Dr. Shoulders basically in her presentation talked about her involvement with 4-H, FFA, students at Western, how she's cultivating those students to bring them back and get their interest in. But again, she has ran into those roadblocks where their GPA doesn't quite get them into vet school. So we're going to continue to work on that, and we'll be more than happy to take any questions you have. Commissioner, if you have any wrap-up comments.
Thank you, Keith. As you can tell, he ran lead on getting this group together. A lot of the folks in the audience today were at this meeting. There are some positive things. Okay. We have world-class diagnostics labs with UK and Breathitt, operated by Murray State, including a BSL-3 lab, which can handle some really nasty stuff out there if it ever were to come to Kentucky. We also have phenomenal research done by veterinarians in Kentucky as well. The Gluck Center, then the equine hospitals as well is the equivalent of having two MD Andersons right next to each other on the same road. So there are areas of our veterinary practice that are really superb and internationally known as well. And one last comment, special thanks to Dr. Katie Flynn, our first female state veterinarian. You know, as you can tell, did not get much free time these last several months. Special thanks to her and her staff getting us through crisis. So thank you, Chairman Hornback.
Thank you, Commissioner. One thing I would like to mention to members, too, we talked a lot about Auburn and the schools that we've already always cooperated with on getting vets. But you do have a letter in your folder today from a Steve McLean talking about his daughter wanting to go to vet school, and it talks about looking at expanding to other schools that offer the same type of practice. So just so members know that. We've got several questions. I would like to thank Dr. Flynn for being here today. You all have a very tough job. Your job is public health, food safety, food supply, and you have to react very quickly. And I do thank you for the work that not only you do, but all your team at the state vet office that you all do in making sure we have a good, safe food supply. So thank you very much for that. Our first question today comes from Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here today. This is good news, as the commissioner said. At last month's tobacco settlement agreement meeting, Director Lacefield touched on that veterinary graduates being able to use their loan as a match. Is that designated specifically for food animal vets or any type? Are there parameters on that?
There are some parameters. It's targeted at food animal vets. However, we all know that they have to have, in many cases, that small animal to make the cash flow work. And so it's very loose in the way that the guidelines and the criteria are interpreted because of that scenario. As long as they do have a large animal or food animal focus or some participation, then yes, they're eligible.
Very good. And I'm excited to hear there are already 14 people participating in that.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's questions for Keith. You were talking about the resident, non-resident breakdown. Is the non-resident breakdown just account for people that live in another state but kind of practice across a border into theirs, or is there another group out there that constitutes part of this non-resident licensure?
In my experience, it's not uncommon for a veterinarian to hold license in multiple states. And so in some cases, it may be this is their home. They may want to come back here at some point. Dr. Flynn is an example of that, where she had a Kentucky license long before we pursued her to come to Kentucky from California. But so multiple factors, but a lot of times it is the fact that they have either been here and keeping it alive, or they have hopes to come here.
So some of those non-resident licensed in Kentucky aren't actually presently actively engaged in the practice of medicine here.
That's correct. Here in Kentucky. That's
Okay,
correct.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Quarles, Dr. Flynn, Keith. Thank you for bringing this to our attention again. It's something we're aware of, but sometimes it gets put in the back of our mind. A few years ago, CPE facilitated a task force, and we looked at our veterinary slot situation at Auburn in this issue. Some of the things I remember, we actually discussed the possibility of having a veterinary school at the University of Kentucky. But when we looked at the cost of establishing that and keeping it going, it did not seem feasible financially. Previously, just a little history here, the veterinary slot program was handled through the budget every year. We did pass legislation a few years ago that put that program into statute. For the members who may not be totally aware of how that works, and Keith, I think you highlighted this difference with the student loan debt. That program does not cover the total cost of a student attending Auburn or Tuskegee. It only covers the difference between the in-state tuition cost and the out-of-state tuition cost. So those students are incurring the cost to go to Auburn or Tuskegee, and it is a limited number of slots. The issue you have is, number one, if we discuss more slots, does Auburn have the seats available? Do they have slots available? And then it becomes a budget issue for Kentucky. And in reading the letter, I think I'm open to having that conversation about these other schools. Our arrangement with Auburn and Tuskegee is negotiated through the Southern Regional Education Board. They negotiate those contract rates. So I appreciate this, and we need to continue this conversation and see if we can work towards solutions. Thank you.
Representative Tipton, I can real quickly tell you that Auburn most recently did see an increase in their overall class size. They got the accreditation to allow to increase that. I think it was to 130. Don't hold me to that exact number, but that is something that they are also looking at, is how they can expand and increase the number of slots.
Senator Webb.
Thank you. Commissioner, there are many days when I wished I would have stayed at my visit to Auburn and pursued my veterinary dream, but I've been involved in these issues since then because we've seen the shortage, and it's dire, really, as in the equine and food animal industry. And sometimes I talk to vet students, particularly at Morehead State University, where we have a very high percentage of acceptance. Yeah. And they'll have me come in and talk about policy, what to look for, curriculum, animal welfare versus animal rights, some of the obstacles that we're up against as in industries, and they are too as veterinarians, and the policies that affect them, sometimes within their own ranks. And I always tell them they've got to be involved in their associations, because the large animal vets are out working. There's not many of them, and they're out, and sometimes policies dictated by small animal vets, and I love and appreciate them too. But somehow there's sometimes a disconnect. So, and I've had that conversation with Auburn. So I'm glad to see that we're talking about the dialogue with the vet schools for curriculum, incentive, encouragement, and what kind of training or education these kids get, because it's important in steering your career path. And we want to steer them back here. We want to steer them back to rural Kentucky. And my question is, when we see the corporate influence in the acquisition of practices, and I know it's happening a lot in the small animal field, and I know when my dad sold his optometry practice, nobody wanted to come to rural Kentucky because they had a lot of debt, and the corporate side could give them a lot better, shorter time to pay that off, put it that way, with more structure, less overhead, da-da-da-da-da. Is that corporate influence affecting practices here or numbers, or do you see that as a potential in steering more away from large animal practice, or a corporate influence in the large animal practice that could impact it either way?
Glenn Sellers, who was there with Auburn that day, told of one example where a corporate practice was offering an $80,000 sign-on bonus to vets. Now, how do you pass up that to go to rural Kentucky or do large animal? Yeah, it's having an effect. We don't know the extent. Dr. Flynn, you want to add anything to that?
No, I do think that it is an issue, and it's a growing issue, whether it's small or large, it is out there. And it is something that hopefully we can get our hands around through these discussions and through the Modernization Act that is going to address some of those questions.
I appreciate that. And I represent a couple of veterinarians too. One of them's very actively involved in that, so I try to keep up. But I appreciate the commissioner and his team having these conversations, because it's not a real easy conversation to have, and there's not a lot of easy solutions. But we want you to know, appreciate the public dialogue, appreciate the participation with all the stakeholders, and keeping us informed to help you solve this crisis before it gets worse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Graham.
Mr. Commissioner and Chief of Staff, and this has been really an interesting committee meeting, and I've enjoyed the presentation and what you talked about. I would just like, if you could, Mr. Rogers, explain what you were talking about when you were saying the conditions of, and your potential solutions. I'm talking about the last slide, in terms of the conditions of SREB's contract. If you can explain that a little bit to the committee as to what you're talking about.
Well,
Please.
What we're talking about there is where you have the 38 slots for Auburn Vet School each year that Kentucky helps support, as Representative Tipton said, pays the difference between out-of-state and in-state tuition. Putting some sort of conditions on those slots, maybe not all of them, maybe just some of them, whatever. Maybe it goes back to what I said about finding those that are interested and passionate about food animal, and giving them an incentive to come back to Kentucky. In other words, we'll forgive part of your loan debt. We'll repay part of your loan debt. We'll do something, okay? Maybe it's a cash incentive, maybe it's some other type of incentive to those contract seats that you basically enter into an agreement with that student that when they complete, when they get their degree, that they come back because the state has supplemented or supported their education there. They come back and repay that in some way. Does that help answer?
Yeah, I asked that question because I wanted it to be out there, because some people may not know who are watching or who have an interest or been involved. I've been involved with SREB, so I knew that. I knew about that, but I wanted to make sure that we all knew exactly what SREB does in terms of this. So thank you.
Yeah.
Just a point of clarification. So when you appropriate the money, it doesn't go through KDA.
Right.
It goes through CPE and then SREB. Like other reciprocity agreements with Kentucky, those positions are negotiated and paid out. But one thing I've noticed visiting with students is that if you can identify someone that may perhaps grew up in animal agriculture, maybe not on your farm, but maybe they showed animals in 4-H and FFA, and they get to Auburn or Tuskegee or other veterinary practice schools, they're more likely to come back to their hometown. But the problem is there a home? Is there a practice? Is there mentorship that is critical in your first few years, out of school? And that's where the medical community, the human medical community, has, I think, done a good job, where they are able to attract ophthalmologists to rural areas of Kentucky, or heart specialists to rural areas of Kentucky, because they tend to try to recruit someone that grew up in, say, Floyd County, whose dad is a doctor, participated in these programs, and they want to set up roots back where they grew up. And that's where I think we maybe need to get more meticulous on the recruitment side.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Herron.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentation today. It was very informative. I know that there are a couple of clubs like 4-H and FFA that expose young people to this career And I guess my question is there any type of magnets or programs inside public schools to where kids get curriculum, they get credit to expose them earlier, maybe in middle school or high school? And if not, is that something that is potential that we can start to consider?
I'd say the answer is yes. That a lot of our FFA programs right now, those they have agriculture teachers that a lot of their classes are science based. They help contribute towards your science curriculum requirements to graduate high school. There's always room for improvement, but I know we have some students here today that probably took those classes before they graduated. But some school districts like Fayette County have a dedicated ag program, a dedicated brick and mortar facility called Locust Trace that they have like a really nice facility there. And Louisville's coming online. I think they have 2 FFA chapters right now, and so there's always room for improvement. But yes, there is curriculum that I think would be similar.
Thank you.
Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Critical issue that we clearly need to enlarge the pool and get creative about enlarging that pool. I've got 2 questions. We have the federal program set up to incentivize people. The language we use in broadband is to go out to unserved and underserved areas. Do any other states have a similar program to the federal program that they've set up themselves that follows kind of a similar track where we as a state put money in the kitty and we pay either loan forgiveness or cash to set up shop for 5 to 10 years, something like that? Do other states do that? That's the first question. Secondly, if Kentucky was to do something like that, do you think it would have an impact, or would we just be picking out of an existing pool, or would we be expanding the pool?
I can answer your first question. There are a couple other states that have had these programs where they do the loan repayment type situation at a state level, and it's industry based. The industry supports it, but they have been short term. They've done a couple years to look at it, and I don't know of any that have been long term stood up programs. Out west, there's been a couple.
So you can't say whether or not they were successful, or
yeah, they only had a temporary. They did it as a pilot project that I'm aware of.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Take a stab at your second question. I think anytime you offer student loan repayment, you're going to get people interested in at least looking at the program. I don't know what the sweet spot would be. At the end of the day, these practices need to make money. I mean, that's what it's a business for a reason, right? But
we could also possibly offer cash, because all those student loans are going to be forgiven anyway, right?
I didn't get that.
Thank you. Representative Pratt.
Rep. King and myself both sit on tobacco settlement. We've actually discussed this a lot, in the fact that we use that agricultural money to send students to the vet school. They come back to Kentucky as small animals. So it's been a struggle we've actually talked about quite a bit, and that's something we're trying to figure out ourselves. But one thing you did touch on was GPA, and luckily in college, all 3 of my roommates were pre-vet. That's one reason I graduated, because they studied their behinds off. And the one who did not get in had a GPA of 3.54.
Yeah.
That was the GPA, the cutting line. Mm-hmm. I was nowhere close to 3.54, I'll tell you that. But interesting, I just got back from vacation down in Orange Beach, and one day I was sitting talking to a gentleman whose daughter was trying to get into Auburn vet school, and he was complaining because the daggone Kentuckians are taking up so many slots. So I thought this is relevant on several issues. But yeah, like I said, you're right. There's several things about that. But again, I'll tell you, for the people who have not actually looked at a vet, you could get into med school just as easy as you can get in vet school. Yeah. They study that hard. Yeah. The curriculum's that hard. It is a tough degree to get. So I have utmost respect for those people. Thank you, sir.
Representative McPherson.
Yes, so I graduated with a Dr. Shoulders at WKU, and there was a group of people like you said that were trying to get into vet school at the time, and only about half did because of the GPA. And I do agree, if you want large animal people to work large animal, especially males, you've got to lower the. I say lower. You don't lower the standards per se, but you've got to take into consideration the whole person. The measure of the person is not always through your GPA. The question I would ask was, what is our return on our investment? Do you know what a veterinarian brings to the state economic-wise or to an area? I know a doctor to move into an area they say brings so much money into the area just by what they do around that area and what they bring in. Do you know what a veterinarian would bring in or what their worth is to the state as economic drive?
I'm not aware of any of the analysis done by any of the AVMA economic studies for that specific issue. I don't know that answer.
That's a great question that we'll look to see if we can come up with an
Lots
answer.
of things that we try to invest in, we want to know what our return on our investment is.
Exactly. One thing I didn't mention is we are looking at the second meeting, probably sometime after Labor Day, of this group. And the next, as this meeting focused on the supply side, the veterinarian organizations and the vet industry, and providing that information, the next one will be focused more from the ag side. So that'll be a great question to work to get some answers to.
Thank you all for what you're doing. I appreciate it.
We've got 3 more questions and then one that's got a follow-up, and we're not going to take any more because it's already been an hour. So we've got Representative Stevenson.
Actually, my question has already been asked and answered. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay. Representative Pfister.
I'll be very brief. I just want to echo what a lot of the other people have already said, and thank the department and the commissioner for highlighting this. And I want to thank you all for your work in the veterinary end of things. As a lifelong farmer, I know how hard it is to get a vet out to the farm, if you can even find one. Special thanks to Dr. Flynn. I've had the opportunity to reach out to her, not just as a legislator, but as a citizen. Does a fantastic job, and I want to welcome Dr. Barley over here as well. Understand that he is going to carry on our Woodford County legacy at the department. We've had somebody in the vet area over there for the last 30 years, so welcome, Dr. Barley. Thank you.
Senator Givens.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I think it's been a great conversation. I'm going to ask you to back up about 5 slides because I want to emphasize an observation that I think is really quite important. One of the Auburn slides, as you go back about 5, is going to speak to the challenges of rural veterinary medicine. And for those of us, go back one more, I think. For those of us that live in rural communities and have watched our veterinarians and know how vitally important they are, I think this slide has lots of the challenges summarized here, and one of the biggest ones is life balance. If you know our large animal rural veterinarians, it's tough. It's tough. To come out and dedicate yourself to a small rural community, establish a family there, stand up a business, and then know that you've got to be on call almost solely as a practitioner 7 days a week for the entire year, it's tough. It's so hard on these folks. And so when young people come out, I think we all know these things, but I'm just emphasizing them. When young people come out and look for an opportunity and they see that money and they know that they can effectively clock in and clock out at a small animal vet practice, or especially a large corporate with an $80,000 signing bonus, it's difficult for us to compete against that. So as we look to solutions, and I applaud Department of Ag for leading on trying to find solutions, I think there's a lot of good information on this slide. Can we provide relief veterinarians? Can we provide assistance in standing up these business models? How do we help these veterinarians who come out and want to buy into a business? The law community does a great job of transferring business from a law partner to a law partner over time. Maybe our vet community has models we can pick up from there. I don't think there's going to be one single silver answer that's going to say, I'm the solution. It's going to take a collection of them. I applaud you on the conversation. But I think this slide alone emphasizes a lot of the challenges we face in rural Kentucky.
Thank you, Senator Givens. Senator Howe.
Yeah, thank you. One thing, we've talked about a number of things. Some of them are outside of our control. We can't control Auburn's admissions practices for GPA or anything like that. It seems to me the thing that we keep coming back to is the relative debt load and the relative revenue streams from our veterinarians in state. And we were discussing this amongst ourselves up here some. Seems to be an awful lot of debt and commitment to get a degree that, relatively speaking, from a professional standpoint, doesn't seem to produce a lot of income. And has there ever been any comparative analysis done with other professions as far as what it costs to buy into a degree versus what they come out of? You know, we talk about this comparatively speaking for rural medicine for people, and they develop all of this this student debt to get a medical degree and come into our rural areas to practice. But they make a lot more than what the average vet does as well. I just wondered if there was any comparative analysis for other professions. I think that's something that we'll want, if we're going to go down this road, it might help us to know what we're getting for our money and why we're contributing that for these professionals.
I'm not aware of any, but I'm sure there's some studies out there we could find for you. But at the end of the day, the vet students, they go there because they love animals. And it's the calling, and some people have expensive hobbies, you know. And
yeah, but to Senator Givens' point, for $80,000 or $90,000 a year, to ask someone to crawl down in a ditch to deliver a calf in the middle of February with it snowing it takes a very limited skill set, and we might have to incentivize that. And I think we need to kind of know why we're incentivizing it for relative to other professions.
Yeah. Good point.
Thanks, Senator Howe. And thank you, Dr. Flynn, Keith, for your all's input today. I hate to cut the conversation off because it is something that is very important to the rural community, and Dr. Flynn to food safety and public health. So we appreciate the work that you're all doing because it is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think, Commissioner, you have another group to come up. I'd like to invite Dave Maples, Cary King, Nikki, some of you all forward. And if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record, and you may proceed.
Good morning. I'm Cary King. My wife, Representative Kim King, and I raise registered Angus cattle in Mercer County. I'm currently serving as the president of the Kentucky Cattleman Association, which is a volunteer position. And I just wanted to kind of highlight, I think they're going to kind of pitch our idea that we were presenting today, but I just kind of wanted to come in here and sometimes these committees see a lot of gloom and doom and big issues that are hard to overcome. Not that ours are not big, but I see everything as optimistic. I think we're in a good spot in Kentucky. Over the last, since we've been involved in the cattle business, we have seen such improvement in the product that Kentucky is able to produce. And I think in large part is this committee's commitment to funding genetics through Ag Development Board. All these monies that have been put forth have been a huge success. Sometimes we look back and we did something and we wonder how it worked out. Well, our product in Kentucky has just improved dramatically. As I've traveled in the West years ago, I guess it's been 25 years ago, I was in Kansas and we were looking at their cattle at a big sale, and there was a group of guys over there talking about cattle prices, and one of them mentioned a price per pound on 5-weight steers, and one of them said, well, you can't buy those steers for that kind of money. And he said, well, yes, we can. We just did it last week. And he said that it was in Lexington, Kentucky. And they said, oh, Kentucky cattle. And they were looking down. They didn't mean to offend me, but it kind of did. You know, they were looking down their nose at Kentucky cattle. But you know what? At the time, there was a lot of truth to that. Okay, but since that time, I know I have made it a personal thing. I want people to say, Kentucky cattle. You know, these are Kentucky cattle, and they're top of the food chain. Well, we have come a long way to get there. I'm sure we still need to make some improvement, but we've done great things in Kentucky. And another thing that I see as a huge opportunity for us is our location, where we're at. We're not just a Kentucky-based deal. We're regional. We're Eastern United States now. And in our organization, as I'm here today, I guess I'm here as a producer today, but I do represent the Kentucky Cattleman Association, and we're doing magazines for almost like 20 states, and the whole Eastern United States is looking to Kentucky for leadership, and we are the go-to. I mean, when Pennsylvania has an issue or Florida has an issue, they talk to Kentucky because we've become a leader. So we have a lot of respect in industry, and it's because of a lot of the efforts have been put forth by people sitting at this table. Dave Maples has worked so hard for years to put us in this position. Well, as things have started to evolve and get better, we see you all know when you go to the meat case that meat is not a cheap product. You're paying plenty for that piece of meat. But when we look at our producer, who is doing a lot better, like I said, his product has gotten better and better and better. He's still kind of doing things the old way. He's getting that 5-weight steer up, and he's weaning it off, and he's sending it to Kansas, Iowa, Texas Panhandle someplace, and letting them finish that product. And then it goes to processing. Somebody's making that money, and then we're paying for that at the meat case. So when you see the local food movement, as you see this, human health, I think, is a big thing here. I was just talking on the way down here with one of my good friends, Dr. Williams, rode with us. What we put into our bodies, we're learning more and more about how it affects our health throughout our whole life. And we've learned a lot, and there's probably a lot we still need to learn. But anyway, as we strive to get to these things, I want to see our producers in Kentucky be able to do what they love. Like I said, there's a calling. I mean, our people that get back into the livestock business, not just cattle. We're a wide-ranging deal here. We have our friends with Livestock Coalition, our pork people, our corn people, our soybean people. What I like about what we're talking about doing is it seems we're all coming together. I mean, we're coming together with all aspects of agriculture, and even not even just agriculture. It's Kentucky. So what we're wanting to do is to be able to see this better product that our producers are producing, be able to stay in Kentucky. And we do have, usually we have a lot of moisture. Right now we're kind of going through a dry spot, but we have a lot of moisture. Wintertime's kind of hard to keep cattle in Kentucky, but we've learned we can do that in these barns, and we can finish our cattle, keep them in Kentucky, process them in Kentucky. You all as a committee and as a legislature and as Ag Development Board have put money into these packing plants. We have Chris Milam for one here with Hampton Meats, different ones that are in these processors that we have now that are doubling their size, maybe tripling their capacity. That's good for all of us. You're able to go and buy a piece of meat that came from Kentucky, was raised right here in Kentucky, stayed in Kentucky. It's healthy, it's safe, nutritious. So that's what we're after. And we also we have tried, as you all have been made aware of, to attract a large packer. I think we still need a large packer. We need regional packers, and then we also need a large packer where we can send our Kentucky beef all over the nation. We're located where we can, within a day's drive, we can be from Maine to New York to all the way to Florida, the coast. All the population of Kentucky is close to us. And with fuel prices, we're shipping our product all the way to Kansas, paying to ship it. They feed it, and then we ship it all the way back past us, back over to New York and Boston and all these places, and where the people are buying it. So they're going to make the pitch of what we've really got planned. But I'm really excited about it. I see it as this is going to really not change the beef industry in Kentucky. This is going to change Kentucky's economic outlook, because it's all of agriculture, and they're all in the room. And it makes me proud when I see people from the grain industry left a vacation to come home to be at this committee. He's going to fly back, one of our friends, to come to, because this is important. This is not cattle. This is Kentucky. And I'm proud of Kentucky. I've always been in Kentucky. I'll die in Kentucky. And I want to see our products be the top of the food chain. And like I said, when New York Cattlemen's Association needs something, I want them to know that they can get that information in Kentucky because we're on top of it. I want to be this might not be the right, but in the West, Denver is kind of the headquarters. They're the hub, okay? And I want Kentucky to be the hub this side of the Mississippi River. And to do that, you've got to have a central location to where you can bring all the people to the table. We now have, I forget the name of but it's the Meat Processors Association's been formed. I think that's a great thing where they can all talk to each other and learn from each other. All our different organizations can all come together, and also with our universities to bring the research that we need and to learn how to do this thing in an economically sufficient way and help our producers be sustainable. So with that, I want to turn it over to, glad to have a Commissioner of Agriculture sitting beside me. And
amen, brother. That was good. Well, okay. That was from the heart. I'm going to be very brief and let Nikki do what she does best, and that's present a dream come true. I mentioned earlier we're a livestock state. We have a premier research facility down in Princeton that we're rebuilding due to the tornado. That facility is phenomenal for grain and forage research and production. Now it's time to do the same for livestock. And we have a presentation. Many of you all are familiar with this. We actually talked with you all this session, but we decided to make sure we get everything in our ducks in a row. So before we come to you for 2023, that we have exactly what we need in front of you. And that's going to be the Ag Education Center and Meats and Food Development Center located at the Woodford Research Farm. One thing we learned about COVID is that people want to buy local. The Kentucky Proud brand has never been stronger. We're great at breeding animals, feeding animals, backgrounding them, but sometimes we're not processing all of them here. Now, different industries have different production models, but what you have behind us are our grain producers, our livestock coalition from pork, cattle, poultry, small ruminants, and beyond. This is the number one ask. This is the number one ask from the ag community going into next year, and that is to build a facility that carries on the research, but also the investments that we've made in meat processing, $7 million in 30 different facilities the past 2 years, is a focus on food safety as well, that if we're going to support these meat processors at double, triple capacity, let's make sure the food standards are there, and a world-class facility to not only demonstrate what we're trying to do, but also train those who want to choose meat processing as a career to have a facility where we can have a state-of-the-art modern training facility to support them as well. I want to say a special thanks to Dean Nancy Cox and members in the audience today for putting this together, particularly our friends at the Cattlemen's Association. And with that, I want to say, before you see this presentation, the Kentucky Department of Agriculture fully supports this as a number one ask. So, Nikki. Here you go.
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Commissioner. I think they've summed up the concept pretty well. So let's talk about what exactly we're talking about here with this presentation. And as everybody has already said, you know, our industry supporters, what you see in the room, I have heard this committee many times talk about agriculture being bipartisan and working together. And I want you guys to know that your industry groups feel the same way. We all, whether it's pork, you know, Nikki Ellis with pork and Dave Maples and Dr. Williams with our Cattlemen's Association, Sarah Coleman with the Horse Council, Drew Graham's back there, Farm Bureau, has been very supportive of us, H. Barlow with the Dairy Development, Chris Milam with the newly formed Kentucky Association of Meat Processors, Debbie Ellis and members of her leadership with the Kentucky Soybean Board, Laurie Mays with the Kentucky Chamber Agriculture Workforce. She's the project manager there. Lots of our Animal and Food Science Department faculty members, and Caleb Ragland, our cheerleader, our champion of the Livestock Coalition. They drove all over Kentucky today for this presentation. We work phenomenally together every other day. But today we come together as a unified and cohesive voice to present an opportunity for Kentucky. We were going into the new decade in 2019 with a lot of industry strategic plans. I know the Cattleman's finished up their long-range plan, and it was very focused on value-added marketing within our products. You know, in the agriculture industry, we always like to look at our producer and our products and how we can add value to both of those. And then COVID hit, right? And so it really threw a kink. Our industry took a big hit, and our food supply chain took a big hit. And all of a sudden, we began focusing on our food supply and asking ourselves, is our food supply chain strong enough? So our priorities kind of shifted. We still had priorities going into the new decade for our producers, but it really started focusing on our food supply chain. And so one of those priorities that came out of, again, this coalition of industry in Kentucky, number one was strengthen our processing industry. We needed workforce development on technical assistance, food safety, research in our processing facilities in Kentucky. We needed to collaborate the efforts of advocating Kentucky's agriculture assets. Like Cary King said, Kentucky is an awesome agriculture-rich state, and it has been for years, and we need to advocate that to the masses. We need to support value-added marketing. I think you could talk to any producer and get us in a room, and we always want to talk about value-added, whether it's value-added production practices, but we need to make our producers economically sustainable. We need to provide that technology transfer. We have a lot of great research through USDA and UK being done, and we need to provide that out on our production side, our food side, and to the consumers. Like Cary said, we need to promote food's impact on human health. Dave wouldn't say this out loud, but he was in a hospital for 5 days and with COVID. And so after they treated his body with antibiotics, the next 4 days they treated his body with food. And a lot of that was rich protein. And we need to study that a little bit more. And we need to draw and bridge that gap on food's impact on human health. And then we want to look at immersive education models. Our regional universities and technical schools developing programs to overlap focus areas and facilitate these internships and apprenticeships. So these were our industry priorities coming forward into the new decade, knowing what we know with COVID, knowing what we knew in our own industries. And so we really started looking at a public-private partnership and centers that are all over our nation. And we kind of started saying, well, why can't we have that in Kentucky? You know, we are a great agriculture state. Our food processing has been the focus area. We need to look at a public-private partnership and a center. Oklahoma State has a great food and agriculture product center that I know we looked at, and that kind of fit the same model we were looking for. It was a service to their food processing industry. It provided research for solving problems and creating those new products in the food processing industry, and it was education on that technology transfer again into the food processing industry. Since that was developed in 1997, it has increased over $300 million in sales revenue back to their state and has created over 1,000 jobs. So this was definitely a model we were looking at to replicate in Kentucky. We began site visits. We went to Mississippi State, Colorado State University, Purdue University, and the Certified Angus Beef Culinary Center. We wanted to immerse ourselves into those facilities that were already doing well in their own state and saying, okay, well, what does Kentucky have and how can we do that in Kentucky? I know, Richard Heath, you are always about personal experience, and I can tell you, until you have a knife in your hand and you are cutting a subprimal meat, you know, I've been in the game for 16 years now. I thought I knew everything. I've watched Dr. Renfro back there break down a carcass. Until you actually have the knife in your hand and you're breaking down, you realize how little you know and how poorly you're doing a job at it. So we got to this point and we were gung-ho. but we needed that partner in our partnership. And it made absolutely common sense to us that the University of Kentucky, our land-grant university, be that partner. And they had a commitment with UK, and we signed a memorandum of understanding in October of 2021. So what I'm trying to say is, while I'm going through this presentation with you, this has been about 2 years' work of strategic planning, laying out our objectives, going to site visits, and really getting commitments from our partners. So then we started saying, okay, what do we need? What do we need? Do we need a facility? Do we need an education center? And it was quickly apparent to us we did need an education center to serve the industry, to be that public industry voice where 4-H kids could come, or culinary people could come, or producers could come. But we also needed a food processing center, a pilot plant, a training center that would provide that innovative and modern approach to education, to research, to workforce development in the processing industry. So what we're talking about now is 2 facilities in one location, but with a pure purpose and mission for both of those facilities. The Woodford County Farm has been in the use and benefit of UK since 1991. It's about a 1,500 acre farm there right at Woodford County. It is beautiful. So we already had the beef unit, swine unit, and sheep unit there. And we knew there were plans for a dairy research lab, the poultry unit, which I believe is already close to being completed, and a future ARS animal lab and future dairy calf heifer lab. We knew these were already there. So for us, the industry said, okay, that makes sense to put our Ag Education Center right there. UK agreed, and so this has been the plan, if these facilities are built, where they would be located. Again, the Meats and Foods Development Center would also be on this location. Dean Little, previous dean at UK, who does sit on our Cattleman's Foundation, called this once a central focus area for livestock production in Kentucky. And we couldn't agree more. It's a beautiful farm. I know, Representative Pfister, you know that firsthand. So this made sense. So we've got our commitments, we've got our strategic plan, we've got our location. I will give a small history on the Woodford County. That farm was purchased by the General Assembly in 1990. The purchase went through, and in 96, that Phase 1 agreement helped complete that farm for the beef and swine and sheep research unit. It has been a well investment for the livestock industry in Kentucky. Dean Little did propose almost exactly what we are presenting today in 1998. This has been a long-term dream. I know I'm talking about the past 2 years, but for some of us, this has been a dream since 1998. I've always loved this quote. This was in Dean Little's presentation, and I think it still rings true today. The development of new technologies and methodologies for the sake of their development alone is of little benefit to anyone. The true merit lies in the timely and accurate dissemination of that technology in a manner that it reaches the maximum potential clientele. And I couldn't agree with that more. And I know this is a lot, and you're thinking, how many people will this touch? Well, it will touch pretty much everyone. And we'll go over our audiences here in just a minute. But the Livestock Coalition commissioned an architect firm to kind of draw out some specs. Okay, so we've even gotten to this far where we did a rendering of what the Agriculture Education Center would look like and what the Meats and Foods Workforce Development Center would look like. So when I talk about those audiences and what our return on investments, 4 common audiences kept coming apparent in all of our industry groups and all of our strategic planning that we've done. Number 1 was workforce development. I know the previous presentation talked about kids and getting them into the veterinary careers. The food processing industry has a host of careers, and we're not just talking about meat cutting. We're talking about providing that technical assistance on our food safety. The University of Kentucky already does food safety trainings like HACCP and our GFSI and our GAP certifications. We need a facility to train these food safety trainings in. We start looking at human resource training. To run a small business, especially a small business like food processing, you need that human resource training. You need everything that goes along with it. Then we start looking at our worker safety. I know we put a lot of emphasis on food safety, but if you are in a career as food processing or even our producers, we really start looking at our worker safety and our mental health in our workers in those facilities. And then our environment. I know working prior to COVID, water quality in food processing is a must. And we need to work on the research and the training that goes along with that. So workforce development, that was definitely our number one audience. Then we started looking at our value-added food systems. And this audience kind of includes our already Kentucky proud producers, all of our 74,000 farms in Kentucky. We started looking at how could we add value to our produce? How can we add value to our dairy? How can we add value to our red meat and poultry processing? How can we add value in the kitchen to our grocers, our restaurants, our cafeterias, our consumers? So those audience that are already adding value, and how can we, as Warren Beeler always says, make bags of coleslaw instead of just selling that cabbage? And that's what we're always looking for as producers, is how can we add value to our product? I can't work for a trade association and not talk about producers. And what is the return on investment these two facilities would have on producers? I have been in many classes where we are trying to teach producers how important it is their consumers, their product aligns with consumer preferences. And we need to show that to our producers. We need to hang two carcasses in front of them and say, if you go a little bit further with your nutrition, or if you go a little bit further with your weaning, this premium product is what you can get, and this is X amount of dollars back in your pocket. Best management practices, again, for that direct return on investment. And apply research to practical solutions. This is a big one because we know the good research that's being done, but that technology of transfer back to the producer, there's kind of a gap there. And we need to apply that research to practical solutions that they can do on their farm. Gain access to new markets and capitalize on already what Kentucky is doing well. We've talked a lot today about students, and we can't not talk about this facility and not list our student enrichment. This is all of the departments in the College of Agriculture at UK. We need to start collaborating these departments together. Kids are coming out of college and they are in FFA, but they're also in computer science, and they're also in dietitians, and they can also build, a rocket. The kids today are a lot smarter, and we need to start collaborating within our departments to enhance those. Have a computer science major out on the farm. Have a dietitian out on the farm. And really looking at our animal and food science. Creating a pipeline to our junior regional universities. I'm an Eastern grad. I'm a proud Eastern grad. And I want whatever we develop out of these facilities, that Eastern can utilize that. I know we've got some Murray and Morehead State University people behind us, and all of the universities in Kentucky. Again, there's a lot of careers within food processing and the food supply chain. We just need to draw attention and make it attractive. And that includes our vocational programs. I know we were talking about kind of the kids that don't get into vet school. There's kids that don't even get into four-year colleges. And what really attracts them? Is it a 3-day short course in food processing? Can we include some producer value-added programs within that? Again, dietetics and human nutrition on human health, this is something that we definitely started focusing on prior to COVID, and I think this just emphasizes this. The architect firm that we did commission offered up some floor plans for the Agriculture Education Center. We also have the floor plan for the Meats and Foods Development Center as well. So as you can see, we've done definitely our homework. We do have cost estimates, and we know that this is going to be an expensive investment, but we hope that you all see today that it is an investment in all of Kentucky agriculture. We know at the Agriculture Education Center that blueprint is looking at about an $11.3 million just brick and mortar construction. When you look at the land and road improvements, it looks to be about a $15 million total project cost. For the Meats and Foods Development Center, again, this is a pilot processing plant. You're going to have humane handling equipment in there. You're going to have processing equipment in there, so you know it's going to be a little bit more. And our consultation has said that it's going to be about $900 square foot, so that equals about $52.7 million in just the construction alone. About $2.8 million in the equipment, plus the land and road improvements, looks to be about a $16 million total project. And again, these are just estimates, but we have worked and we have commissioned consultants, architecture firms to come up with this to give you a better idea of what this cost would be. Sustainability, once it's built, what are we looking for? Federal grants. Service fees for the consultations or the trainings that are done in there, the HACCP trainings or the product processing consultation, shared use agreements and rental fees within the facilities with our industry partners, and also industry investment. We've already had private investors into this project, and we haven't even broke ground, or it's still kind of in that end of the strategic, but we've already had industry investment because our industry feels so passionate and is willing to already invest into something they see is needed in our state. So what all will this do? Well, we hope to capitalize on a public-private model. Things are different nowadays. Industry is kind of leading the charge here. Industry and university are working together more closely in other state models that we've seen, and we want to capitalize that here in Kentucky. We want to create a proactive industry committee. We want to draw those industry professionals with academia together to kind of see what is needed. Enhance our research and development, increase employment opportunities, and celebrate Kentucky's agriculture. Again, I'm going to live and die here too, Cary. So I'm proud of our agriculture heritage of what we've already done, and we want to showcase that. But we also want to look into our future. We are Kentucky, but we are pretty innovative when it comes to agriculture. We want to be the leader in the Southeast. I know, just speaking on state cattlemen's, a lot of the Southeast kind of look to Kentucky. They look to Kentucky already, and we just need to showcase that. We need to be proud of that within all of our industry groups and be that leader. This is a picture I took from the road of the Woodford County farm. It's a beautiful farm, guys. It's pristine, and what better place to showcase Kentucky's animal and agriculture and food science than right here in this farm. So that is it. That was quick. Any questions? Because I know it's a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. I do want to bring up Caleb Ragland, just as our Livestock Coalition leader. He has some concluding remarks. So, Caleb? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Nikki. I am Caleb Ragland. I'm president of the Kentucky Livestock Coalition, and I'm a farmer in LaRue County. On my farm, we raise soybeans, corn, wheat, and also have a farrow to wean hog operation. So pretty diversified. My family's farmed in LaRue County since 1808, so a little over 200 years, deep roots, kind of the common theme. I lived here and plan to die here in Kentucky. And as a multi-generation farmer, this project is really important for agriculture in Kentucky moving forward. As it's been mentioned, this project, I think, impacts every single farmer across the state, whether you're a grain farmer in Graves County or you're raising cattle somewhere in the eastern part of the state. This is going to help us add value to everything we produce. And we hear a lot about sustainability in agriculture. And as a farmer whose family is 100% dependent on agriculture, sustainability to me, number one, is profitability. We have to make money. That's how we put food on the table. I have 3 young boys who are 12, 10, and 7, and I hope that they have a future to farm here in Kentucky. And they're not going to farm the same way that even I did, or their dad or their grandfather did, or great-grandfather. We have to be innovative and moving forward. And that's what is exciting to me about this project that we're presenting. This is going to help us find ways to innovate, to move forward, to add value to what we're producing. And that's what we need to do to stay on the cutting edge and to be viable in our industry. The economic impact of this project is huge. It's going to be far-reaching, and it's just really exciting to get to present this to you all today and be a part of it. I want to thank Nikki Whitaker for all the work that she's done with the Cattlemans. They've stepped up and done a lot of the work on this project. They're a member of the Livestock Coalition, as all of our livestock and commodity groups are. We're all working together. I want to highlight how much Kentucky agriculture is united. This is not about one commodity. This is about everybody moving forward for common good. And you see the unity that we have there, and I think that's a big part of this. It's not about who gets the credit for it. This is about moving Kentucky agriculture forward. And thank you all for your consideration and your time to hear us today.
Thank you, Caleb and Nikki and Cary, for your all's presentation, outstanding presentation, and Commissioner, for you for sort of tagging along with them. A couple of things, and I've got some questions. We've got some other questions here, too. I got some other questions here, too, about how deep this endeavor goes. And I know it's a large endeavor to do this, but it's something, like you said, Dr. Little had talked about 20, 30 years ago. And I'm sorry I'm not going to be around to help you in the actual body to get that done, but I think it's very worthwhile. People don't understand when you talk about education. I know a lot of this focuses on education and on helping our local processors get the certifications they need. There's different types of certifications. I mean, you didn't mention the beef network and what you all are already doing to add value in the hamburger and stuff you're saying. But how you're limited, and I've talked to Dave Maples a lot, the limiting factors that people don't understand, especially we as a committee up here, don't understand in this industry, that the little bit of fat that you have on animals makes a difference. The way you trim the bones makes a difference. It's that 1, 2, 3% that some of these big corporations can gain over you that makes a difference in profitability, and that's the profitability, Caleb, for our farmers. There's a lot of education goes in this. It's not like some other things that we do as farmers where it's corn and soybeans and you're trading a product, but you're not finishing it to where you have all these variables that are in there. It's a public health and public safety issue. It's about how do we prevent some of the diseases, some of the things we have coming into our meat, the infections coming into our meat. How do our processors do a better job, the local processors we have, Commissioner, do a better job in having the most up-to-date equipment to ensure that we do put the best product out there that there is. I think there's always an opportunity for some type of additional in goal to where we can help our farmers be a part of the processing, to capture part of that. One thing that in agriculture that we don't look at a lot, we talk about processors, talk about our beef farmers. Caleb, our beef farmers try to make about $100 per animal. The last number I saw, processors are profiting about $600 per animal. And we've got to capture part of that too. But that's down the road because there is a very large education process to the people that are going to be the processors, going to work in these plants, to how we grow the beef, how we fatten it, and how we do it. And, you know, like I think Cary said earlier, we've made so much progress in the last 20 years since we had the Ag Development Fund, and we've changed the breeding, we've changed the type of cattle we raise here, we started backgrounding. I think this next 20 years, especially with a facility like this, Nikki, could be much greater than the changes we've seen in this past 20 years. I think we've taken that big step. We've educated our farmers and stuff, and now it's educating the public, making sure we have all the other intricacies in place to move this industry forward. And I think you have a great plan to do that. And I think this is where it starts, and look forward to working with members this year to make sure that we get that done. And with that, Senator West has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation and both topics today. We've talked about creativity and innovation, and Kentucky has a problem, and we're working through that and trying to solve that problem. Mr. Ragland touched on that mainly. You know, we have to be forward-thinking and creative. But I see Dave back here. I'm going to make my yearly speech on my soapbox, Dave, about why we're here with the packing industry. The reason we're here, we can no longer wait to do something as a state. One of the big reasons we're here is because our antitrust laws are not being enforced in Washington on the big packers. They've had a monopoly for years, and that monopoly continues to get larger and continues to be a huge problem. So we can no longer wait on Washington. We can no longer wait on large corporate interests to look out for Kentucky producers. We have to do things on our own. We have to make our own supply chains and think outside the box and move beyond that. And I want to thank you. That's basically what we're talking about today. That's what we're doing. But I also want to point out, you know, one of the silver linings of COVID is that it showed us what happens when you don't enforce the antitrust laws and when you have large packers controlling the market. The supply chain collapsed, and there were serious issues at the meat counter. And so we have to go beyond them. We have to create a new lane for our Kentucky producers. And I would just ask that the Cattlemen's Association, along with the KDA and others, that we continue to put pressure on Washington to do the right thing and enforce the antitrust laws against the packers. I represent a large grass area, and it's unconscionable what's going on right now. Yes, we've seen an increase. We've seen inflation at the meat counter, $20 a pound for prime cuts, but we're getting an extra 10 cents for a 5-6 weight steer. It's unconscionable what's going on. So I applaud your efforts, and but I think we should continue to beat the drum and keep pressure on the packers. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator West. Senator Givens.
Really good presentation. We had a robust conversation back in January, and I think you and Dr. Williams and Dave Maples enjoyed that conversation a lot. I think you focused this presentation in ways that responded to some of my constructive criticisms. If you'll back up one slide, that sustainability piece was my focus. Go back one more. That sustainability conversation was my main focus of a revenue stream concern. Once we build it, building it's wonderful. It would be a grand achievement, and I'm excited about building it. Operating it, though, takes ongoing revenues, and so you're starting to touch on the revenue streams there that are going to sustain the operation. One that's missing, and help me to understand, when we talk about an October 2021 UK Memorandum of Understanding, and you use the word commitment, what is that commitment by the University of Kentucky, and does it provide revenue for the operation of this facility?
Jamie, do you want to? Stinkox here. Do you want to? I'm going to let Dr. Jamie Matthews from UK answer that.
And I do apologize. I have a meeting back at my office I need to get to. Thank you all.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Matthews. I'm the Associate Dean of Research at CAFE. And the commitment, if this building is built, UK will run this building. As these folks have explained, this is a tremendous opportunity for the state, and it's a tremendous opportunity for our university and our college. To me, this project epitomizes what our college is. It's everything from soil all the way up to growing the crops which feed the animals to, importantly now, as several people have identified, the human health. We're no longer think of growing commodities to sell at $6 a bushel. We're thinking of how do we convert that into the right protein, fatty acid, vitamins, and mineral profiles for food for the human gut. That's what we do now. And that is where we get our value-added opportunities to capture that. The commitment from UK obviously goes from a number of the research lines we already have, and we've already started making changes in the college to how we assign faculty lines back to departments so that we can free up a pool of lines that will be required to meet these opportunities and challenges with that. As several people have alluded to this morning, this is a tremendous opportunity for synergy where we sit down, Nikki and I have worked for the last couple of years, Caleb about the last year, and the ideas that they have versus our technical know-how in what we've done is tremendous. And that commitment is there. If this is built, we will make it work. We can go through all the technical details at a different time, but when we talk about federal grants, the federal grant is all about human health. How do, from preschool to what we're doing in, I know from Mercer County, my wife works on it, teaching the kids how to cook, but we're really doing is teaching the parents how to cook and what are those profiles and all the way up through the rest of our extension and work with the medical center. One of the big pushes that Dr. Cox is now involved as a VP for UK engagement is all about how is food and health. It's making that transition in our thinking and making it this opportunity to add value to our various commodity groups and whatnot. So federal grants right now, there are a number of them that are looking to synergize that. We have here listed the cost-effective workshops, trainings, etc. One example would be what Greg Renfro does when he trains Kroger cutters that come in all the time. And we have I'm really excited, one of the things we have here is the training from the NIOS centers that Wayne Sanderson has done, where they do a lot of the health and safety training. A big part of what we have here and commitment from UK is our expertise in sanitation. You mentioned the beef solutions. What's the big problem there is these small plants that you all have invested in have bacterial contamination caused by improper handling of the cattle where they shed more E. coli, etc., all the way up through not sanitizing the plants properly. In this design, it's a purposeful, but it's a small plant. These are pilot plants. These are not killing 5,000 head a day. This is set up for running 10 head a day, which is what you all have invested in our local plants. One thing that hasn't been brought forward, but I would like to take the opportunity, is our produce processing. What our Food Systems Innovation Centers, which this body has funded for a number of years and people have been involved in that. That's another area where it works with Dr. Paul, working with the small farmer turning their damaged tomatoes into salsa. That tremendous value-added opportunities there. So all I can say because I'm not the president of the university, obviously, but UK has a commitment here. We've already have a commitment in all this. This is just giving us an opportunity to interact intimately, if you will, with our industry groups and those ideas.
Great. Thank you for the answer. And a brief follow-up, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief.
It'll be fine.
University of Kentucky commitment is vital to this going and moving forward. I would encourage that if this is a priority for the University of Kentucky, as we get ready to go through the process of listing resources to be built at the post-secondary institutions, every budget cycle, Representative Reed and others that are involved in the budget know this very well, we get a list of priority construction items from each university. It would be wonderful if this were to be a multi-university suggestion of a priority construction item, but it's going to need to be someone's construction priority for us to allocate a total of about $75 million of taxpayer funds to build the institution, to build the buildings. Now, knowing that UK is going to be coordinating the operational costs, that's what I'm hearing you say. There's a commitment from UK to make sure the operational costs are covered through multiple revenue streams. That's very comforting. My second question, Nikki, if you could help me find an answer. I'm confident you've got a similar breakdown of the Meats and Foods Development Center, just like what you've got here on the left-hand side of this slide, which is solely for the Ag Education Center. If the committee could get copies of that breakdown, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Yep. So that's what we're working on right now.
Okay.
So the cost estimate that you see there is from our consultation that we've been doing with the consultant on who builds the food meats labs. We don't have a breakdown, but once we do, I will definitely give it to you.
Great. And then last quick question. Moving from a vision and a dream to actual reality, you're in the process of doing that, and I applaud you again for doing it. But there has to be someone that wakes up every morning thinking about, I got to make this happen, and goes to sleep every night thinking it was a rough day today, or we made success and progress here. Toward the bottom, you've got a line item, and I'm very supportive of the line item. You've got a line item of grant administration, $50,000. Who is the person that, or the entity, is it you? Who's going to wake up every day thinking about this and coordinating this and making sure this happens? Who is that?
Currently, I'm working on it. So, but yes, that is, and that I will say, just for clarification, that line item is from the architecture company.
Okay.
So, but in our Ag Development Board grant, which we did fill out an application for that, we do have service fees in there as well for a person to wake up every morning and figure out how this is going to run together.
And that person's office is located where?
That person's office would be located in the Agriculture Education Center. Right now, so there is not a person yet in that position.
Right.
But once it is, yes, that person would be there.
Who's shepherding the project, though, to the point of getting a building built? Who do we make the check to?
Yep. So the Cattleman's Foundation is taking that role right now. Yeah, so our foundation was established in 1991. It's already in good standing with the Secretary of State and our IRS. So we decided, the industry decided that the Cattleman's Foundation would take that role on.
Okay.
So they are making the funding request.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that I'm very supportive of having such a facility here. So thank you all, everybody that's helped to present and talk about this today, and for the work that you've already put in on this. And while beef is our most prominent here in Kentucky and seems to have been the prominent voice today, I appreciate the way that you have ensured that all of the producers and livestock producers have come together to do this, because I want to ensure that if we build such a facility that they all have access to that. I think it's a really pivotal time right now for agriculture, and that it's a pivotal time for us to expand our agricultural production here in Kentucky, and I think that needs to be focused on all levels, small, medium, and large. And I do have just a few questions, so please bear with me, Mr. Chair. With UK's involvement, I do want to be sure, will the extension agents have access to this for access to farmers? And you're shaking your head, yes. So we expect those folks to be involved. And I'm not sure, I'm hoping that you're familiar. I know that the federal government just gave about $66 million for an animal science research facility here, and it's my understanding that that's mostly USDA, but the UK will have access to that. Are we sure that are there any kind of redundancies that we think that we'll see between the two facilities, and has that already been addressed?
No, there won't be redundancies. It's there are two facilities for the USDA. One is Campus Research Laboratory, which will be next to the Good Barn, and the second will be the animal laboratory out where right next to our beef unit currently sits. It actually fits right in there next to what we call the Intensive Beef Research Building.
Okay.
And so.
Okay, and one final question. Are you anticipating that any of the livestock producers will move their offices there?
Yeah, that is the goal. In the Agriculture Education Center, we have asked that any agriculture industry groups could have their office out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Thank you all so much.
You're welcome.
But that's not a part of the ask for
No,
the state funds.
It's not.
That's just independent.
Right.
Thank you, Nikki. Representative Heath.
Just a closing comment. I've had the opportunity to meet with this group for over a year now, and we've kicked a lot of ideas around. It's come a long way, and I know Dave and Nikki and others have traveled and tried to pull this together. So I'm proud of where we're at right now. I think we're getting real close to the goal line, and I just want to say you have my commitment to continue to work with you and see this project succeed.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Nikki, and to all of your team that's here today, and not just the ones that are direct involved with beef cattle, but thank all the corn growers, the soybean growers, poultry, goats, sheep, everybody that's here today. I appreciate everybody coming together. It shows how agriculture comes together. When there's a project that needs to be done, everybody has the vision. They see that. I want to give special thanks to the other representatives that are here from the University of Kentucky, our land-grant university, because of your all's interest in it. That's what makes these type of projects happen. It is a big project. It's a large project, but it's a very worthwhile project. And I can see us moving forward here. So thank you all very much for being here today and giving the presentation. Look forward to working with you again during the interim and trying to get something in place for January.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Just a couple of other comments, and one thing I wanted to bring up that is not tied in with anything we've talked about today with beef cattle, but the commissioner's already left, but the commissioner always has a vision for different things that are coming up that he sees as an issue. I worked closely with Joe Bilby this year on the Delta 8 bill that passed the Senate, did not pass the House, and Representative Tipton and some others. I had 2 calls this week that you all should know and be aware that the THC levels in this so-called CBD are running between 12 and 20%. There's no age limits, no restrictions, no labeling, no nothing on it. So just something I won't be here next year. You all might look at. Our next meeting is going to be at the State Fair on Thursday, August 25th at 10 o'clock. Look for everybody to be there. It'll be a great day at the fair that day, and look forward to seeing you then. Do any members have any other announcements or anything they need to make? If not, a motion to adjourn.